Hey everyone, this is the full interview from me interviewing Alex Chapman. There is a short version available now on my channel. It's the one without the little tag that says full interview. And this is just the entire interview, awkward pauses and all. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you on... So hey everyone, we're back. I'm here with Alex Chapman. Now, if you don't know who Alex is, he's a full-time bug bounty hunter from the UK. He goes to almost every HackerOne live event. He's on the Syndicate bug bounty team, which is a really cool team that I know a lot of people have say, oh, people don't donate their bounties, but they really do. They donated 5% of their bug bounty money from H1415 to charity. And Alex donated to the Trussell Trust. And if you don't know what that is, that's a food bank or an organization that provides food banks in the UK. So I really wanted to kind of highlight Alex and highlight his work, but not necessarily talking about, you know, what it takes to be a full-time bug bounty hunter in terms of money. We all know that you require money to buy food. That is not an optional. But actually there's quite a lot of strategy that gets involved with which programs to pick and how to pick them and financial planning and all that kind of background that really you have to learn to be a bug bounty hunter. You could have the technical skills, but you've also got to have those kind of softer skills. So thank you for joining me, Alex. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I've got to ask first, what is your background in general? Where do you kind of come from if people don't already know who you are?
Yeah, sure. So, well, as you said, I work here in the UK. I've been into, well, like most people, been into computers my entire life. I remember my first computer being able to, it was actually Commodore 64 and booting up from tapes. Yeah, I'm a little older than a lot of the other bug hunters out there. And that started, kind of just kicked off an interest in computers. Started to program BASIC. By the time I was 10 or 11, I was programming BASIC, Visual Basic, and just tinkering. And then 1995, the movie Hackers came out, and I was hooked from first watching. It was amazing. So then just had to learn everything I could about hacking. Started reverse engineering crackmes, working on old school war games, trying to up my skills and get involved in all of this. Went to university, did computer science at university, and had no idea what to do at the end of it. I knew I had this interest, but it wasn't until I actually graduated I found out you could get paid legally to hack companies. And I thought, fantastic, this is something I really want to get into. So I started as a penetration tester. Worked as a penetration tester for about 10 years as a consultant. Going in and out of companies, doing web pen tests, network pen tests, a lot of security research and presenting at conferences around that time as well. And then a few years back, I decided to go internal and started to work at Yahoo. Just while they were getting bought out by Verizon, I was working in the Yahoo internal red team. And that's where I first got involved in bounties, really. I was helping assess the impact of some of the bounty reports they were getting. And that's how I first came across HackerOne.
Of course, you really came from more of the kind of the triage side than the hacker side, like initially.
Yeah, that was certainly my start, or at least the start of my continuous bug bounty career. I think prior to that, I had one awarded bug bounty, which I thought was great, but didn't realize it was a sustainable thing. And it wasn't until I kind of came across HackerOne that I realized this could be a thing. And then back in 2017, I want to say, I actually started to work for HackerOne.
Oh, nice.
I was working with HackerOne for just under a year before taking a break from work and then ultimately deciding to become a full-time bug bounty hunter.
So I know some people might already be aware of your story, but what was a series of events that really made you decide to do this full-time after you left HackerOne? Sure.
So back in 2018, my wife and I lost our first daughter, which was obviously quite a devastating, life-changing event. I was working at HackerOne at the time, and they were fantastic. They gave me paid months off work and plenty of space to kind of be there, be with my family and try and recover. Unfortunately, the recovery process was going to take longer than I was happy to let HackerOne have kind of dangle for. So in January of last year, I handed in my notice and kind of was at a bit of a loose end for a while, and then thought, actually, I've got all this experience. Why don't I try and put it into full-time bug bounty hunting? So it was around, I want to say April last year, I really decided to kind of kick it up a notch and try and do this sustainably full-time as a career.
So from that, did you kind of have a ramp up period for when you kind of were deciding on this versus actually making it a full-time job?
Yeah, sure. So since towards the end of my time at Yahoo was when I actually started submitting bugs myself to through HackerOne, and throughout my time working at HackerOne, I was always bug hunting on the side. So kind of I was very aware of what I was getting into at the time. So I didn't go from nothing to 100%. There was very much a kind of a 12-month ramp up period, and then when I decided to kind of commit to it full time, that's where for the first month or so, I really hit it as hard as I could.
I suppose you're trying to figure out kind of how much you can make and what the income potential might be.
Yeah, precisely. Because I was only bug hunting on an ad hoc basis before that, I didn't have an income stream as such. It would be 1 month I'd get some money, next couple of months I might not. And we all know with kind of bug bounty payout times, it can take a couple of months maybe to get paid. So April was, so this was April 2019, was a make or break month for me. I managed to do really well. I think I managed to submit some in the region of 10 to 15 bugs.
Wow.
And actually built up a pretty good pipeline from that month that set me up for the rest of the year.
Right, let's have a chat about income, because the income is obviously the big thing when it comes to like bug bounty hunting, and you're actually quite open about how much you make. You publish your blog posts on income and how you make it. You write that you aim for 10K a month. What kind of leads to that decision for you? How did you choose that number in particular? And I guess follow on, what kind of financial planning really goes into deciding that? Yeah,
I mean, the two are very much interlinked. So I looked at my previous salaries as a penetration tester working at HackerOne and Yahoo, and kind of wanted to set myself a challenge, but also a salary that I would be happy to live off. My wife and I now have another daughter, so she's not working at the moment. So it's very much looking to the future, thinking how much money do we need to maintain our lifestyle. I live in London, which is obviously a little bit more expensive than some regions of the UK. I've got a mortgage to pay and all the rest of it. So it was very much sitting down thinking, right, what are my outgoings? How much do I need to earn to survive? How much do I need to earn to continue living a comfortable life? And what would I be happy with? But it was also a consideration of the amount of time I wanted to spend working. So I definitely wanted to work flexibly and be able to take time off as I wanted. My initial goal was to make 80% of a full-time salary while working 50% of the time.
Okay.
I don't think I quite met that goal, but that was more often than not. That was because of interest that kept me wanting to work more than 50% of the time. So I didn't hold myself to that, but I certainly met or exceeded the 80% of full-time salary that I was going for.
So with that, did you kind of do anything formally, or was it more of a kind of informal process? Like, did you involve outside accountants or anything like that, or was it just a case of outgoings, income, here's how to balance it?
Yeah, very basic. This is what our expenditures are. This is how much money I think I need to make. I was very fortunate. My wife has a good job as well, and she's been very supportive of this whole thing. And I'm reasonably well known and have some good connections in the UK pen testing market. So I always had that as a fallback. I was relatively sure I could get a job within a month's notice if I needed to go back to full-time work and this didn't work out. So I kind of had multiple parachutes if I needed them, but fortunately I've not needed to pull any of them.
So speaking about parachutes and kind of kind of preparing for the worst. When you have a bad month, how do you actually adapt to that? Do you have like, what kind of mindset do you go into? But also, you know, are you looking into like 3 months in the future, 6 months in the future when bugs will pay out?
Sure. So I think that answer is different based on how I'm feeling, how well I'm doing. I'm more than happy to work on programs with longer payouts if I know I've got a lot of money in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
So I run all of my bug bounty payments through a limited company here in the UK, and I don't draw everything out of that company as soon as it comes in. So I pay myself a salary on a monthly basis.
Oh, so there's some float in the business essentially.
Precisely. So I know if I don't work right now, if I don't work for the next few months, I'm absolutely fine. But I'll need to start thinking of bringing in some more money after that. And that takes the pressure off it. I treat it very much like drawing a salary. It's there. I'm not trying to become rich doing this. I'm trying to live comfortably and enjoy the life that I live.
I think that's important as well. I think a lot of people see bug bounty and they see on Twitter, they see the lovely cars and, you know, people able to just drop 10 grand, 20 grand. But actually to do this full time, you really have to focus on getting that sustainable income, because when you have a job, you know the money's going to be there. You know the bills will get paid, you know the rent or the mortgage will get paid. But I think it's really important to stress that you don't always know that when you are doing this full time, and it's really important to not forget that it's just living comfortably for a lot of people.
Yeah, precisely. And that's, I'm not a flashy person. I'm not interested in fast cars or kind of an expensive lifestyle. So this way of working certainly suits me very well.
You mentioned having a limited company, and I've got to ask, how do you manage your taxes? Because I don't know if people outside the UK really know what it's like, but here taxes aren't as bad as the US, but they're certainly confusing, especially if you run a limited company, because you've got all kinds of confirmation statements and corporation tax and all that kind of stuff. So how do you manage your taxes?
I pay somebody to do that. I have very little interest in managing money. So yeah, I've got a local accountant here who's pretty good. Well, he seems to be so far, and I just make sure they're on top of my obligations on that front.
So kind of related, when you get your salary, do you get any other financial advice with it? Are you making investments, or are you really just focusing on kind of paying yourself a salary and focusing on that side?
Barring paying into a pension, not very exciting. I don't really have that many investments, nothing that I actively manage. Again, I'm not actually interested in money. I prefer technology, I prefer hacking, and that's where I spend my time.
So let's talk about that then. What kind of bugs are you looking for when you get on a program? Do you look for low priority issues? Are you looking for only like criticals and highs? What are you actually looking for when you go into a program?
Sure. Generally, I will only be submitting highs and criticals. That's what I go looking for. If I stumble across a medium along the way, or something I think would be a medium along the way, I'll probably report it, as long as I can do that in a kind of quick manner without having to take too long over it. I
guess really you're making a kind of risk statement of, is this worth my time? Or should I be focusing on the bigger picture?
Yeah, precisely.
Kind of related here, and a question actually came from Twitter. How do your earnings scale with time? So if you're hacking longer, do you see more bugs coming out of that? Or do you just kind of see a diminishing return when you just can't necessarily get a bug to pop?
Personally, for me, there's definitely a diminishing return. I know I work best in the mornings. Kind of my sweet spot is if I'm awake from 6 a.m. through to about 10 a.m.
Wow. Yeah, real mornings.
So I've got, we've got a new baby in the house or in the family, and she either wakes me up or I wake up because of her. And I'm here, I'm steps away from my office, so I come in and get some work done. But I find it a very productive time for me. And then I try and take a bit of a break, help out around the house, and then kind of get back into things. So I can spend more hours working, and and I know I can earn more money the more hours I put in, but definitely after about 8-9 hours, unless I'm really deep in a bug, I know it's time to call it quits.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually found over this kind of past 3-4 months with having a new baby and taking time away in the day, that it actually gives my mind a bit more time to work. So
because you're
I'm effectively
thinking on
still,
them.
yeah, precisely. So I'm still working. I'm just not sitting at the computer. And I've been amazed at some of the ideas that I've either woken up with or kind of been downstairs to soothe the baby, spend time with the baby, and come back and just think, I would never have thought of that. And
Lucky baby.
It's resulted. Yeah, quite. She's earned me a lot of money so far, so she better keep it up.
She's going to pay her wage when it comes to the 18 years you have to support her.
Yeah, definitely.
So a big thing about being a bug hunter full-time is obviously strategy, which we've kind of touched on with what kind of bugs to look for. But I think really what a lot of people forget is there's quite a lot of risk management that goes on. And you posted about this on Twitter about managing your risk. So I just want to ask, how do you manage your risk? How do you kind of focus on your time and manage that?
Sure. So I'd probably say I've got 2 reliable programs that I'm pretty certain if I spend 8 hours on, I'll be able to get a good bug. And I kind of keep them in my pocket for when I feel like I'm not earning enough money or need that boost of finding some good bugs. Mm-hmm. And I know I've chosen those 2 companies or those 2 programs based on how quickly they pay, how interested I am in what they do, and obviously how much they pay for high and critical vulnerabilities. So I always have these 2 programs I feel I can fall back on, and then I'm certainly starting more and more to branch out and try different programs and try and find another couple of those that I can add to that list.
Do they tend to be mostly public programs or mostly private programs that you look at? Or a mix of both?
Yeah, it's mostly been private companies, but it's not because they're private programs. But it's not because they're private programs. It's because of the companies and the technology they use. That's much more appealing to me than whether or not a program's public or private.
So do you focus on just one type of technology, or do you have kind of like your little skill set that you look for? If you get an invite, you're looking, does this match my kind of profile of what I like to hack? Yeah,
I've definitely got a preferred style of program, and I'm not a very good web app hacker. I'm competent, but it's not where my interests lie. I much prefer kind of reverse engineering, source code review, and analysis for complex systems. So I've done a lot of work on CI/CD pipelines over the past 12 months. I did a very short talk on it at I think it was 44Con last year about assessing CI/CD pipelines, and that I found a lot of really good and really interesting bugs in those sorts of situations, because it's the interaction of complex systems that really interests me, and that's where I find a lot of really good bugs.
So really you've kind of developed a bit of a speciality there almost that's kind of separate from what we might think of as like web-based hacking, of really diving in deep into kind of like a subfield.
Yes, certainly. And I think based on my experience as a pentester and pseudo researcher, I've got a skill set that a lot of other bug bounty hunters don't have, which is the kind of source code analysis and reverse engineering side of things.
Without somebody stealing kind of your bugs, is that something you'd recommend to people who maybe are watching this, are really interested in just getting started in general, developing a speciality like that?
Sure. To a certain type of person, reverse engineering is a hard slog, and I'm by no means very good at it, but I'm competent. But it takes a lot of time, a lot of dedication. It's something you feel like you're not seeing the whole picture until it clicks, and that can be days or weeks of looking at a single thing. but then when it clicks, you feel like you've got a good understanding, and you can then start to piece things together.
So you mentioned complex systems. When you're looking for a bug, are you kind of doing a breadth first search or a depth first? And I guess what this really means is, are you looking at all parts of the system, or are you narrowing down on those parts that you're like, likely bug there, likely bug there?
Yeah, I'm very good at narrowing down my search pretty quickly. And I'm not very good at persevering when I think, or if I think there's not a bug there, I just went, right, ignore that, move on. So I hone in on what I want to spend my time on pretty quickly, which is somewhat of a weakness of mine. Because I know I'm leaving a lot of bugs on the table by not persevering in certain areas because I don't find it interesting.
But I suppose it's also an advantage because you can find the bugs that really only you can find because you have that speciality.
Yeah, it's not only me, but there are a small number of us compared to the kind of standard web hackers out there. Not to cause any offense.
I guess you're kind of, my next question is really related to consistency. So do you have a strategy for finding bugs super consistently? Do you have bugs for that you look for, like you just see an indication, you're like, right, that's there? Or are you more of a kind of following your intuition?
I've certainly got a cache of bugs that I think, okay, they're using, I don't know, MySQL over there. I know MySQL tends to be poorly configured, or MySQL clients tend to be poorly configured, so I'll see how they're doing authentication to the database. Mm-hmm. Or Docker. I'm focusing quite a lot of Docker and Kubernetes at the moment, and seeing how bad things can be done with Docker and Kubernetes. So these are newer technologies that I'm trying to learn myself. Mm-hmm. So I've got an interest there, and I know they're complex systems, so they're very often poorly configured. Kubernetes is updated very often and gets out, and a lot of things don't follow the update streams for that. So you can find a lot of interesting and a lot of good bugs by looking at these kind of more modern technologies and more difficult to configure technologies.
So with something like Kubernetes, which is really, really, really recent, especially being deployed now, we really have only started to see it kind of within the last few years, and really majorly only this year or last year. How do you learn something like that? What's your approach? Are you taking on a developer role? Are you just poking at stuff? Are you watching conferences? What's your kind of approach to learning?
Yeah, certainly watching conferences, following people on Twitter, seeing what...
Any recommendations for people to follow on Twitter?
Yeah, in Coldwater. I think it's Coldwater. Sorry if I got that wrong. Really good one, really good voice in Kubernetes. Coming up with some really good research and talks. Kind of definitely follow along there.
And there's one on Animal Crossing as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet. I heard it, or heard about it, and I was just amazed that the things people are doing during this time is fantastic.
It really is.
So definitely those resources, but also like kind of spinning these things up for myself and then seeing, right, as somebody who's configuring this or developing with this, what have I got to do? Mm-hmm. And then trying to get into that mindset of how could I easily do it wrong, or how could somebody else easily do it wrong?
So it's really taking on the kind of defender role, but then attacking your own stuff to kind of understand it better.
Yeah, the developer role more often than not. I like to consider myself a very, very bad programmer.
Which is good because most are.
Yeah, precisely. So I think how would I have broken this, or how would I have programmed this insecurely? And then a lot of the times they've made the same mistakes I would have done, or the same shortcuts I would have done, and that can lead to some good or some interesting leads.
Right, I have to ask. I've got a lot of videos now on note taking. How do you take notes? Do you take notes? What do you take notes on? How are you kind of involving the note taking and reflection process in both your learning and your hunting?
Sure. So if you'd asked me this 6 months ago, I would have laughed and said, what notes? And that was probably me at my lowest. So since the baby came along, I realized I wasn't going to be able to spend consistent amounts of time hacking away and just being able to know everything. So I was aware I was going to have to start writing things down, and if I had random thoughts, making sure I got them down so I didn't forget them. So I started looking at GitLab and their ticketing system. So that kind of started working out quite well. So I've now got quite a good setup with GitLab issues, with tags for things that I think are leads, things I think I need to look at, things that I think are definitely bugs, but I haven't had the time to investigate it yet. I've even got a few bugs in there that are tagged with to report that I just haven't got time, haven't got around to writing a report for.
That's really interesting to use something like GitLab. Do you find a difficulty kind of processing something that, because obviously it's not meant for taking notes. Do you find any difficulty in that process, or do you just think it just works really well for how you think?
It works well for how I work. It's a bug tracking system after all. That's what it's there for. I do wish the free version of GitLab had more functionality. Some of the paid and enterprise features would make my life a lot more easier. I just haven't looked into procuring those yet. But probably about 4 months into using that and finding it really, really has helped my hunting.
That's a really good piece of advice as well for people who might be listening, that, you know, if you're struggling to take notes in kind of a more traditional note-taking app, don't forget there are other solutions that aren't necessarily made for note-taking, but if it works for you, that's the important thing. Like, if you can find that your note-taking process is really fluid and you can just do it and it's not taking that kind of cognitive load, the kind of brain thinking to do it, then it's something worth investigating. So I want to chat about working now. This is going to be a really interesting interview. So how do you spend your workday? What does your day look like? You spoke a little bit about starting early, but what actually happens when you start? Are you going into GitLab, looking at like what your leads are, or are you more kind of chilled out?
Yeah, so generally I'll open up my issue tracking and see where I finished off the day before or a couple of days prior, and kind of what open questions I've got, what open tickets I've got effectively, what I think would be good leads to follow up on, and kind of process from there. If I feel like I'm getting towards the end of leads that I've got, I'll go hunting for a new program.
How much time does that take for you? Do you do a lot?
Sorry, choosing programs or? Yeah,
choosing a program.
That takes me a lot of time. I find it quite difficult to settle on programs. So I'll generally, if I find a program that I'm comfortable with, I'll generally try and find very similar programs run by different companies. Mm-hmm. So again, CI/CD pipelines, there are several companies that have CI/CD pipelines and have bug bounty programs. So GitLab is one of them. Trying to think of public programs I'm allowed to talk about. Atlassian, another one with Bitbucket. So I like to have
it might be worth, I don't know if
like
everyone knows what CI/CD pipelines are, but they are continuous integration, continuous development. It basically lets developers push their code changes via something like GitHub, where you just go in, you commit a change, and it goes into a kind of pipeline and gets served. That might mean that there are other steps in that where it goes, a database gets updated, or some other service has to be restarted that kind of happens in that pipeline to get it delivered. Just because I don't think everyone knows what they are.
Yeah, of course.
Well, for the developer here.
So if I'm looking at I prefer looking at the technology. So as I say, in this case, I consider the technology the CI/CD pipeline. And I know there are 4 or 5 programs I can submit bugs to that all have these pipelines in scope. So I can be working away on one and think, it's not an issue here, but actually this reminds me of a situation on program Z over here. And I'm trying to do that more and more now, to not necessarily find the same bugs on each, but use one to inspire another. And
really using it as a jumping off progress.
Yeah,
process.
Very much so, and I'm finding that's working really well for me right now.
Do you set goals for your, do you do any goal setting, or are you really just focusing on getting those issues and just that's your goal?
Yeah, I have some goals in terms of what I would like to submit, but I mean, the only hard and fast goal I really have is making sure I can hit my financial targets for the month. And if that happens early, yeah, quite. If that happens early, I might take a couple of weeks off. Or if I feel like I'm burning out, I'll take a couple of weeks off and just deal with it that way. So I don't want to tie myself to the desk if I'm not working well, and that's something that's been very hard for me to get out of that mindset of just being at your desk. Certainly working 9 to 5 for the best part of 15 years did kind of grill into me. You've got to be at your desk. You've got to be there. Mm-hmm. And there were just days I would be working back then when I just wouldn't get anything done. I was just not being productive.
Staring at the computer.
Yeah. And now I know, right, I just step up, I walk away and come back the next day or the day after that, and I'll feel refreshed and I'll feel like I want to get started rather than having that hanging over me.
And is that part of keeping that productive headspace and making sure that those hours you do work are really productive?
Yeah, very much so. So I'm working for myself, so I don't want to spend dead hours where I'm not doing anything productive. And it sometimes takes me a little while to work out that I'm not being productive, but then when I do, I kind of make sure I step away, I take myself out for a walk, spend time with the family, whatever I need to kind of feel like I can get myself back in the game.
What does that kind of look like? What does your bug hunting mindset kind of look like? Are you usually thinking like super technical? Are you getting inspired by something that's kind of, you spoke about your daughter being somewhat of an inspiration to you. Does that happen a lot where you're
it's very good. Yeah, it's very good rubber duck debugging. Just talking out loud, trying to explain something or trying to think about something. I'm obviously work on my own, so I talk to myself quite a lot. Certainly if I'm trying to work through something really complex, my wife will often pop her head in and be like, "You talking to me?" I'm like, "No." But I do find talking out loud and explaining things to myself quite a good process. That is one of the downsides to working for yourself and working remotely. I am generally quite an introverted person, so it doesn't affect me that much, but every once in a while I do kind of crave human contact and just have to get out and meet people.
I think a lot of people are struggling with that now with COVID, obviously. Pretty much everyone is working from home if they can. Yeah. How do you deal with being more isolated apart from having those kind of brief moments? Do you work in teams for your bug hunting or is that just for live events? How do you kind of deal with that isolation aspect?
Sure. So I only really work with or collaborate for live events. It's not something I've put into my day-to-day bug hunting. I've throughout various parts of doing this, I've had grand ideas of trying to get a local group together. So it would be local to London, trying to find some bug hunters to work with. But every time I think of ideas or of people I'd like to work with, they're very happy doing what they're doing at the moment and not willing to make the jump to doing full-time bug hunting, which I completely understand. But it does. I think at some point I would like to get a local team together to work together, but that's kind of long-term goals.
Has the spark kind of left a little bit then from like doing it part-time to now doing it full-time and it being your job? Do you think the spark and the enjoyment has kind of gone, or are you still feeling really good about it?
It's an interesting question. I still really enjoy what I do. It's the only job I've ever done that I really love is hacking, and the love is still there. It can get tiring, it can get draining, but it's one of the most interesting jobs I can even imagine doing. And I get to work on so many different technology stacks against so many different environments, and it's my choosing. There's not somebody telling me I need to go and do this thing that's really boring for the next 6 months and end up hating my job, which I've had happen in the past. I took sabbatical from my first full-time job it just got too much to me, and I went snowboarding for 3 months just because I completely burnt out and I hated it. And I was hacking, and somehow this company had made me hate this thing that I really enjoyed doing. And I kind of vowed never to end up in that situation again. but kind of came back from snowboarding and kind of got back on with consulting, and yeah, things got better. But
you kind of found the love again for it.
Yeah, but now I'm working for myself and in charge of my own destiny. It's much more freeing, and I don't find it as taxing as any other job that I've done before.
Do you still get excited if you get a bounty or a really large bounty?
Oh yeah, hugely. If not even the bounty that excites me, it's the finding what I believe is critical vulnerability. I love that. I think that's fantastic. I don't care if I get paid a couple of $100 for it or $10,000. I prefer to be paid $10,000, but it's more about the excitement of finding the bug or something technically really, really cool. And
I think that's important in bug hunting. Whereas, like, if you want to do it, you have to love the process of finding them. You can't just be after the money. You've got to find the technical part quite interesting as well, and get a lot of reward from that. Do you do anything apart from bug hunting? Do you do any security contracting, or is it just bug hunting for you?
No, so certainly up to this point, it's just been bug hunting. I've had a few offers. An ex-colleague very kindly offered me some consulting work. So he was worried I wasn't going to be making any money doing this. But no, I'm 100% doing bug bounty work at the moment, and yeah, I'm loving it.
So there is obviously going to be people listening to this who want to pursue this. So I want to ask you to provide some advice and just some ideas of what this might look like for people. So could you give me your top 3 pieces of advice for people who want to pursue full-time bug bounty hunting?
Sure. Okay. So firstly, make sure you have the ability to find bugs consistently. Don't jump into doing this because you found one bug or because you think it's cool. It is a slog. I am very successful doing this. I'm by no means the most successful, but I am successful. But I have effectively 15 years of experience of penetration testing behind me. I have 20 too many years of technology behind me, and it's not something as a young teenager or somebody just coming out of university. If I was in that situation, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm. Your advice would be maybe get a job, get that experience, maybe doing pen testing or developer stuff, and then pursue it kind of when you've got that experience, that consistency in your bug hunting.
Certainly.
That's very important.
I guess my second bit of advice would be to learn to program. And this one is a bit controversial in the bug bounty scene. I know there are some very successful bug hunters who are very open in that they can't write a single line of code.
Stoke.
I think that's fantastic, and it works for them. But from my perspective, and I've said it previously, I like to think about how something is programmed and how I personally would have gone about programming. And that
I'm exactly the same.
That helps me figure where I would have introduced bugs.
I think learning to program is it may not be necessary, but it is kind of a cheat code. Because what you're essentially doing when you're bug hunting is, you've got all these pieces to a puzzle, but they are completely unlabeled, they're just white. And the more you know about programming, the more you know about how they could piece together. And I think that's really important for if you really want to be getting those consistent bugs, is know consistently where developers mess up. Because they do, they always do. So your third piece of advice.
Oh, okay, this is going to be a hard one. Third piece of advice. If you're going to do it, make sure you've got a plan. Make sure you know how much money you need to earn to be able to live. Make sure you've got a plan for what happens if it goes wrong. Make sure
a business plan, essentially.
Yeah, make sure you're not going to ruin yourself by doing this. I saw some awful tweets on I think it was about a month ago, of somebody who was getting quite frantic because they'd submitted a load of bugs to a particular program and they weren't paying. And this person was saying they're about to lose their house, they're about to be homeless, they can't afford food because these bugs aren't being paid. And it was just such a heartbreaking situation.
I remember the post.
And just don't let it get to that point. Make sure you have a plan and know when to call quits and pursue something else too, so you can survive and keep living. And that's, don't ruin yourself doing this, I guess, is my third piece of advice.
So what do you like? You really like the freedom. You mentioned a lot that you like having the freedom to work however you want or whatever you want, and working from home and working really for yourself. What advice would you give somebody else? What would you wish you had known when you were thinking about this a year ago?
That it is possible, that you can do it.
Just a bit of motivation and encouragement for
yeah,
yourself.
I can be very harsh on myself if things aren't going well. But to know that there are people there that can help. There are resources out there that can be helpful and can help you learn, that can help you process and proceed. And if you have a bad month, it doesn't mean the next month is going to be bad as well. So that was a big thing for me. I would have bad months or bad weeks and just think, oh, I'm not, it's done. I found all the bugs I can find. I should do something else. But that's because I can be quite hard on myself, and then it gets to the next month and I find the bugs I need to find. It's like, oh, everything's fine again. Everything's good.
What do you think the best part of your job is, and what do you think the worst part of your job is in doing this for yourself?
The worst part of the job is always report writing. I oftentimes spend more time writing a report than I do finding a bug. But I do that because I take pride in the reports I write, and I try to make sure they are of a professional quality. I did do consulting pen testing for many years, and it's something that was drummed into me, and I later on in my career drummed it into other consultants, is that the product is the report. You can own all the boxes you want, you can pop shells all over the place, but unless the client can understand, or the customer can understand how you did it, reproduce it and fix it, then they've not gained any value from that.
I think the impact statement as well is really important to get right, because if you want someone to care about what you're reporting, you have to present it to them in the language that they're going to look at and go, this is a report we need to read and read soon.
So I
and
still
the best
find
part?
The best part is being able to have kind of multinational companies and not get arrested. Is some of the things that I've seen, some of the bugs that I've found, I'm so immensely proud of, and I can't speak of them, but just to know that they were there and I was able to find them and save numerous companies from nearly catastrophic, or what could have been catastrophic events, it's a pretty good feeling and very good ego boost as well. So
and I guess to finish off this, people watching this are going to be beginners. What do you think, if someone is just starting out bug hunting, maybe isn't sure if they want to do it full time, just wants to start bug hunting, what should they learn now that's going to help them in the future when maybe they do consider pursuing bug bounties full time, or as just a really nice side income?
Sure. I think one of the big things to learn and to understand is bug classes. And I know Stuck is a pretty good example of this. Learn one class of bug and learn it well, learn it thoroughly, learn it inside out. Program applications that are vulnerable to it, see how they can exploit it. Find training rigs out there that are vulnerable to it, see how it can be exploited. See what the difference between exploiting it in Java, in Python, in Go are. Just learn something inside and out, and then try and look for it, try and find it everywhere. And once you feel like you've mastered a subset of bugs, move on and try and expand that and iterate on that and kind of try and spin up from there.
is there any like new technologies coming out now that you think are going to be really good for beginners to learn? That won't be what you're doing, obviously, because then they'll find your bugs.
I always like a bit of competition. Not necessarily for beginners, but Kubernetes is the next big thing. It's if you're not understanding, or if you're not working with it now, you will be, and programs will be using it more and more. I've had multiple programs saying it. We know about this issue. We're gonna try and fix it when we move the environment to Kubernetes, and just going to see it everywhere. In terms of programming languages and things like that, I would say choose whatever you like and is good for you. I would advise people learn Go, because it's just being used everywhere now. A lot of tools are written in Go. Yeah, and it's something I'm really pushing through myself, is move away from Python and move towards Go programming. But that's just because it's being used everywhere. And having that skill of being able to understand how things are done in Go will really help. So thank you very much for speaking to me today. I really appreciate you coming here and really talking about some quite difficult subjects, but also some quite interesting ones. And really giving an insight to what this is like to do as a full-time job. So thank you very much for joining me, and thank you everybody for watching. I hope you found this discussion interesting or useful. If you want to find Alex, you can find him on Twitter as AJ Chapman. That's right, isn't it? Or is it Alex J. Chapman? AJX Chapman. AJX Chapman, there we go. I'll put links in the description, so don't worry about all of that. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.